All right, talking about Division II football, finish it up with Trinidad. Let's talk about his Bulldogs team. And in this game, I mean, there was a whole lot to cover, guys. This Bulldog team, they get punched in the mouth early on, and you're not going to see it here, but Slippery Rock, they had things going against a very talented Ferris State attack, and that's one of two forced fumbles in the first half. This Slippery Rock defense able to generate that, both of them by Eddie Faulkner on the defensive side for Slippery Rock. Ferris State, though, they would respond. They had a pick six. They started clicking offensively after that, and they just got rolling from there on out. Another Harlan Hill finalist in Braden Long was connecting all over the field. That guy had himself a day. Logan Romper, 8 catches, 171 yards, 3 touchdowns through the air for him. But we talked with Trinidad earlier on. You see him doing damage all over the field, whether it's in the pocket, scrambling, rolling out to his right or his left. It does not matter. The guy can do it from anywhere. Braden Long, he had 2 interceptions inside of the red zone in the second half. Ferris State, the defense, pitches a shutout in the last 2 quarters. In Ferris State, they take this one 48-38, Bulldogs on top. Here's Chambliss rolling out again, doing it with his legs by himself to the outside for another score. Once again, the dude does it all. He's got some really great pieces around him in those offensive skill positions. You see it here, another one of those big-time interceptions in the red zone from that Ferris State defense. And that really was the name of the game in the second half. Ferris State finding a way to kick the ball out of Braden Long's hands and get it away from that Slippery Rock attack. Plays like this certainly don't hurt either. Ferris State has been known to just gash teams, whether it's on the outside with pure speed or up the middle with physicality. Ferris State is multidimensional. They can do it all, and they certainly did that on Saturday, at least in the second half. Took a little bit maybe of a slower start that were uncharacteristically, kind of with this Ferris State team. But nonetheless, the mark of a very good football team is to get the job done no matter the start. All about how you finish. Ferris State, they finished in a very good fashion, got the job done on Saturday. So, moving forward from that, talk about those 2 fumbles earlier on. And again, I think the first big note is a massive kudos to Slippery Rock. Nobody, and I mean nobody, gave you a chance in this game. Jimmy and I and or anyone on our show, we didn't necessarily do the game picks for this week. I'll be the first to tell you I would have come on here and taken Ferris by at least 14. I'll be the very first one to tell you. I'm sitting in the studio at work on Saturday. I was called in, and I'm sitting there watching on one of the TVs that I had it on, and I see that connection to start things off, Long to Romper on the sideline, and I'm like, oh, shit. My genuine reaction was, oh, shit. What kind of game is this going to be? And again, nobody gave him a chance. They're up 4 going into the fourth quarter. Braden Long, he showed that he's still the dude. Chris Dior, Dries Lawrence, one of the best backfields in the country, and even against a very great defensive front from Ferris, they limited them a lot offensively in that offensive backfield. I talked about the day that Logan had on the outside. The Rock, they punched first, 60-yard touchdown pass. I didn't even know what was happening. And then you talk about some solid game planning from the Rock. And Trinidad and I talked about it a little bit. They had some great pressure in the run game, took down a few plays early for a loss, but played Chambliss very differently in the first half. Felt like typically the teams would put a linebacker in kind of a quote-unquote spy responsibility for Chambliss. And if you're not familiar with football, basically, if you're on a spy assignment as a defender, or there's other verbiage and other kind of words for that, disregard any other assignment. It's like guarding the best guy on the basketball court. You go where he goes. So the quarterback is just going to drop back and pass. Yeah, just sit there and wait. And as soon as he picks and chooses and declares a side, go after his ass, make a tackle, and try and make a play behind the line of scrimmage. But that has not been working for Team Slippery Rock. They flipped it up. And the defensive line from Slippery Rock playing what I would call very gap responsible, not getting too far upfield, definitely not much of an emphasis on penetration or, pass rush, so to speak, from that Slippery Rock defense, who they have a good defensive line unit. It was just a different game plan from them. Chambliss still had 120 yards rushing with all of that being said, which is very impressive. I talked about it, the 2 interceptions in the red zone. That hurts. That really felt like it sealed the deal for the Bulldogs. The defense, they shut out the Rock in the second half, started getting some more pressure on the quarterback as well in that second half. DBs from Ferris. I think that's been kind of the question mark for this defense. We know all about that linebacking core, right? You talk about Sefa Sapaya, Connor Neer. They might be the best linebacker duo in the country. 19 combined tackles in this one helped hold Slippery Rock to only 55 yards rushing on over 30 carries. Hell of a stat. The defensive line, led by the likes of Victor Nelson and just demonstrative people up front that are able to get to the ball and make plays in the backfield. We know about them. But how about the DBs? they were outmatched, a little bit outsized in this one, and they stepped up to the challenge in the second half. They're going to have to do that again in the national championship game. Valdosta State has some weapons. They also have a dude slinging the ball under center and Sammy Edwards. So that'll be the most interesting battle for me. Ferris State, the defensive backs, seem to step up to the challenge in this one, but I think that is certainly the point where, Ferris has the most opportunity to improve is at that DB position because they got guys who can run. They certainly can keep up. The speed is not a factor, not in that regard, but the size and kind of the physicality, I think, is where we could see some improvement from that Ferris State team. And here, cool little clip of the guys ringing the bell post-game. Ferris State, an absolute run. After starting the year 0-1, they now advance to their 4th national championship game in program history. And when you talk about it, they're just coming off winning back-to-back national championships, and they lost it in 2018. So we're talking about a run here from this Ferris State squad that is among the best in the country, the best in history. To be honest with you, they continue some of this success. They're starting to get into those ranks. So that's enough on the Bulldogs for now. We'll talk more about the championship matchup here in a little bit. Let's go and talk about Minnesota State on the road at Valdosta State. And I'd be remiss if we talk about this game and do not talk about the running back for the Blazers. Alfonso Franklin had himself a career day. Look at this stat line. 24 carries for 152 yards on the ground, 4 catches for 66 yards through the air. That would combine for 5 touchdowns on the day. 5 touchdowns. Valdosta State scored 35. Let's see, 35 divided by 7. It's been a while since I've taken a math class. This guy did it all for Valdosta State. And obviously, there's more to it than that. Some great offensive skill. The offensive line had themselves a day. I don't even need to say that. But just this individual performance, very incredible. Kudos to this guy. Have a day, dude. Like, absolutely go and have a day. The 5th time in school history, Valdosta State has won 13 or more games in a season. That, too. Pretty really neat statistic there. But again, talking about this one, Mankato, they prove they belong in a game like this. And before I talk about them, actually, there's a note here. Franklin's 5 scores. That marked the most touchdowns in a game at Bazemore Hyder Stadium and the most points by one player as well. Broke both those records in the stadium. Mankato, though, they proved they belonged in a game like this. Valdosta State felt like they were scoring quickly at times early on. The first 3 drives, either side, ended up in touchdowns, and the defenses felt like kind of started to settle in. And this one game was very competitive. Going into the 4th quarter, Minnesota State was down 2 scores, right? You're down 14 going into the 4th, and I think a lot of people would have counted them out. You look at that sideline. Minnesota State was nothing but smiles, cool as a cucumber, easy going. And that says it all about this Mavs squad. They've been down and out so many times over the course of the season throughout conference play in the NSIC. And they have won a lot more games than they've lost that have come down to the wire, especially when they've had to make a comeback late. I think you saw that level of composure from this Mavericks team in this one. I was personally very impressed by that. It felt like the momentum, even though being down 2 scores, was with the Mavericks in those moments. They come out, they score to make it a 7-point game. They've won a lot of those kind of games. And we saw a very different Mavs squad this year. Kind of used to them playing more of that bully ball style, really tough offensive line, a couple backs that are just thick kind of barrels between the tackles. Even Sheen Butler Lawson a year ago had a little bit more finesse, but was kind of one of those bully type backs. But this year, 2024, Hayden Eckert took big strides as a passer. He had some great weapons on the outside. Trayshawn Watson comes to mind immediately, but there are other guys, Grant Guyette, and some other pieces to that offense that really helped him along in that way. That benefited them in the late games for sure. That style of offense is obviously much more suited to a comeback type of situation than maybe running it between the tackles. But I think the change in that Mavs squad, showing they can play maybe 2 different brands of ball, still find a way to win these big-time games and get to the national stage. Very impressive from that team over in Mankato. Rance Connor, he had a 48-yard interception return in the final minute. That sealed the deal for Valdosta State. Felt like Mankato could make something happen on that possession, then who knew what was going to happen? But I thought a really cool note from this one is Coach Jack, Tremaine Jackson there, who also congratulations, AFCA Division II Coach of the Year, a great award there. They're on the 3-yard line and up 2 scores. And as opposed to tacking on another score, making the score maybe look a little bit better for when people look back on this game in 10 years and they say, oh, they only beat them by this much. Like, it's very easy, I think, from a coaching standpoint to think about that and to say, well, I want it to look like a commanding win and not just feel like one. Because Valdosta State was in control of this game, but again, you look back in 10, 15 years, a lot of people are only going to judge it by that box score and the number. So I thought it was a very classy move by him to kneel and go victory formation right there. Felt like the right thing to do. And even though it feels like that, it's certainly not the easiest thing to do. So I wanted to say kudos to them for doing that. I think that's respect towards an incredible opponent in Mankato. But Valdosta State, they pull this one out over Minnesota State. 35-21, your final from down in Titletown, Georgia. Valdosta, they're in the national title for the 7th time ever. I mean, that's become the expectation for the Blazers. They call it Titletown for a reason. That is the reason. This is the 3rd time these teams have met in the championship game in the last 7 years. We talked about it with Trinidad earlier on. They played in 2018. Valdosta State got the better half of Ferris. Ferris comes back and steamrolls them in 2021, and now we get the grudge match. And I think he mentioned it earlier on. This Valdosta State team is a clean slate compared to that 2021 squad. You're talking about a whole new coaching staff for the most part. You're talking about a whole group of guys at Valdosta State that don't even know about that run from the Blazers, as in they didn't experience it. Obviously, they know about it. I'm not an idiot. But what it also means is this is a different play style. This is a different identity, a different culture from a Valdosta State team that has gotten better at a lot of the areas that cost them that national championship just a few years ago. And if you watch that championship, you know that Ferris dominated the line of scrimmage. They got so much pressure on the quarterback, was scrambling the entire day, and they dominated between the tackles on offense. And Valdosta State, if they've gotten better anywhere, it's in their front 7 on defense, and it's on their offensive line group and their downhill run game. They have gotten better in those areas. They've gotten bigger. They've gotten stronger and faster at the point of attack at the line of scrimmage. And if you're playing anyone, that helps. But if you're playing Ferris State, it's a necessity. And for them, that's the biggest point. That game in 2021, it was 58-17, for those who didn't watch. It was nasty. Now, it feels like this defense, I'm not going to say they can absolutely do it, but they can. If they play their A game, they can keep up with the skill from this Ferris State defense. Feels like they can go sideline to sideline. Ferris loves that kind of modified triple option with a pass in there and some other kind of unique wrinkles. They love pure speed to the outside. Can Valdosta State match that speed and go sideline to sideline with a very dynamic Ferris State attack? Can they eliminate the chunk plays up the middle that Ferris has been able to generate, whether it's on the feet of Chambliss or a guy like Katzer or Brady Rose or down the side? There's so many weapons that you have to kind of pick and choose who's going to get theirs on that given day, right? So I'm very excited about it. I'm sure I'll talk more in depth about it later in the week, but really excited about this national championship. And honestly, if you would have told me that it was Valdosta and Ferris playing in a title game this year at the beginning of the season, I'd have been like, yeah, that makes sense. That adds up. Not a shot at any other team, but the best teams find a way. They certainly have done that. They've both earned their way into this national championship, and I, for one, am very excited to see how this one plays out. So that's all on the D2 side today. I'm excited for this national championship. Let's flip over.